I never thought a Wi-Fi password could turn a quiet Sunday afternoon into a scene straight out of a crime drama, but you've never met Karen. One moment, I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the warm breeze, and the next, Karen was in my driveway, red-faced and screaming like I'd just stolen her firstborn. She was waving her arms so wildly that even the Joneses across the street peeked out from behind their curtains, their phones ready to record. 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing, and for a second, I actually wondered if I was about to be arrested over my own internet. Karen stomped toward me, her voice carrying across the entire block. "You think you can just cut me off? You think you can hide from the HOA?" The officers exchanged confused glances as she jabbed a finger in my chest, rattling off some nonsense about community property rights and federal Wi-Fi laws that I'm pretty sure she made up on the spot. My son stood behind me, arms crossed, trying not to laugh, which only made her angrier. She kept glancing nervously toward her house, as if she was afraid someone might see something they weren't supposed to. That's when I noticed the way. Her voice cracked, the way her eyes darted. Not just furious, but desperate. And at the time, I thought she was just being her usual dramatic self. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because that was before we found out the real reason Karen was so desperate to get online. Before all the chaos, life in our neighborhood was predictable. I'd lived here for years. The kind of place where lawns were perfectly trimmed, mailboxes matched, and the biggest drama was whether the HOA would approve someone's new garden gnome. I kept to myself, paid my dues, and minded my own business. My son, Ethan, was the tech brain of the family, a quiet, sharp-minded teenager who could fix a router faster than most people could make coffee. Then there was Karen, our self-appointed queen of the HOA. Technically, she was the president, but in her mind, she was more like the ruler of a small kingdom, enforcing every petty rule with the precision of a drill sergeant. She had that sugary sweet voice when she wanted something, but I'd seen enough to know it could turn into nails on a chalkboard the moment you said no. That Sunday morning had started like any other. Ethan tinkering with his computer, me reading on the porch, and Karen making her rounds with a clipboard, probably checking to see who hadn't edged their lawn in the last 24 hours. When she spotted us, she waved and strolled over, chatting about some HOA updates before casually slipping in. "By the way, the Wi-Fi's been acting up for me. Mind if I hop on yours for a bit?" I didn't think much of it at the time. She'd asked before in the past. But there was something in the way she kept glancing toward her house, almost like she was waiting for a signal. At the time, I thought she just wanted to check Facebook. I didn't know she was hiding something much bigger. It all started when Ethan, ever the curious tech wizard, noticed something odd while checking our router logs. There, buried among the connected devices, was a familiar name, Karen's tablet, along with a handful of other gadgets that definitely weren't ours. She'd been connected for hours every single day, even late at night. Ethan looked at me, eyebrows raised, and said, "Dad, she's basically living on our internet." I told him to go ahead and change the password. After all, it was our network, and we were the ones paying for it. 10 minutes later, the password was updated, and we went back to our day thinking nothing of it. But Karen must have tried logging in almost immediately, because not 20 minutes later, there she was at our front door, wearing her friendly neighbor smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Hey there," she chirped, voice just a little too bright. "I think there's been a mix-up with the Wi-Fi. I was working on some important HOA business and poof, it just disconnected. Could you give me the new password?" Ethan and I exchanged a glance. I told her politely that we'd decided to keep the network private. Her smile stiffened, and she gave a high-pitched laugh that sounded more like a warning than humor. "Oh, I'm sure you don't mean that," she said, stepping just a little closer. "You know it's for the good of the community. Some of us rely on this for urgent matters." As she spoke, her eyes flicked toward her house, lingering there, for a second too long, as if checking whether something was still in place. The air between us shifted. This wasn't about streaming TV shows or checking emails. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a tension in her voice, a flicker of something almost like panic. And it was only after Ethan shook his head and refused that Karen's mask slipped completely, and things turned ugly. Karen didn't waste a single day before taking her retaliation public. By Monday morning, she'd sent a mass email to the entire neighborhood through the HOA mailing list, accusing me of selfishly withholding shared community resources and creating unnecessary division among residents. She even threw in some legal-sounding nonsense about how internet access was a communal necessity under some obscure HOA bylaw, which of course didn't actually exist. Within hours, I started noticing the looks. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street without saying a word. 2 of them stopped in front of my driveway to chat, just loud enough for me to hear words like childish and unneighborly. By midweek, 3 official violation notices showed up in my mailbox. One for my lawn being half an inch too long, another for improper trash bin placement, and a third for decorative elements not approved by the HOA. It was obvious Karen was using her position to bury me under petty infractions, but underneath the performance, I could tell she was nervous. Twice I caught her pacing in her yard, talking on the phone in a hushed, frantic tone. One afternoon, while taking out the trash, I overheard her voice sharp and urgent. "They can't find out." "Not yet. Do you understand me? Not yet." The words stopped me in my tracks. Who was they? What couldn't they find out? And why was she so afraid of it coming to light? I had a million questions and 0 answers, but one thing was certain. This was no longer about a Wi-Fi password. Karen was fighting for something bigger, something she didn't want anyone in the neighborhood to know. At that point, I had no idea what they couldn't find out. But I was about to. By Friday evening, things took another turn when a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, looking almost embarrassed as they explained they'd been called about a case of stolen internet service. Apparently, Karen had told them I'd hacked into her Wi-Fi, locked her out, and was somehow interfering with critical HOA communications. I could barely keep a straight face, but instead of arguing, I calmly walked them inside and pulled up my internet account records showing clear proof that the network belonged to me and had for years. The officers glanced at each other, muttered something about civil disputes, and left, clearly unimpressed with Karen's theatrics. But the whole incident lit a fire under Ethan. That night, he dug deeper into the router logs, determined to figure out why Karen had been glued to our network for so long. What he found made my stomach twist. Karen's devices hadn't just been browsing Facebook or watching Netflix. They'd been connected to multiple IP cameras that didn't belong to her. Ethan traced the streams, and sure enough, they were live feeds from inside other people's houses on our street. My first thought was that maybe it was a mistake, but the sheer number of recordings, hours upon hours of them, told me otherwise. Then Ethan found a folder synced to a cloud account, hidden behind layers of password protection. We cracked it open, and there it was. Videos, photos, and documents that had no business being on her devices. And buried at the very bottom was one file with a name so strange it made us both stop and stare. We didn't know it yet, but that file explained everything. When we opened that oddly named file, the truth hit us like a punch to the gut. It was a detailed spreadsheet, dates, times, and addresses, meticulously logging every single hacked camera feed Karen had accessed. Each entry had a note beside it. Argument with spouse. Package delivered. Kids home alone. She hadn't just been snooping, she'd been spying on her neighbors, tracking their private lives as if she were running her own secret surveillance operation. The worst part? All of it had been funneled through our Wi-Fi, making it look like the activity came from our network. That explained the desperation, the panicked glances toward her house, and her immediate meltdown when Ethan changed the password. She hadn't just lost internet access. She'd lost control over her little empire of secrets. My hands actually shook as I scrolled through the list. These weren't faceless strangers. These were people we waved to in the morning, folks who trusted their homes and families were safe. I felt sick knowing what she'd been doing right under everyone's noses. When I told a few of the neighbors, carefully, without showing the files, shock quickly turned to outrage. Within hours, word spread like wildfire. Conversations hushed. When Karen walked by, people stopped answering her emails. The same neighbors she once bossed around now looked at her like she was something rotten. But even as the tide began to turn against her, Karen didn't back down. She sent out another HOA bulletin claiming I was the one spying, and she had proof ready to present at an emergency meeting. That's when I realized Karen wasn't going down quietly. She was about to fight back, and she was willing to drag everyone through the mud to save herself. The HOA emergency meeting was packed, every folding chair in the community center taken, with neighbors standing along the walls just to hear what was about to go down. Karen sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, lips pressed into that smug smile she wore when she thought she'd already won. She wasted no time launching into her performance, waving a stack of papers she claimed were irrefutable proof that I had been hacking into her devices and spying on the neighborhood. Gasps rippled through the room, though I could tell by a few skeptical faces that not everyone was buying it. When she finally paused for breath, I stood up slowly, thanking her for her concerns, before turning to Ethan, who wheeled out his laptop and connected it to the projector. In an instant, the screen lit up with router logs, timestamps, and device names. Clear, undeniable evidence that every connection traced back to Karen's gadgets, not mine. Ethan even pulled up a live screenshot showing her own tablet still, attempting to ping the same cloud storage account. The room went silent. Karen's smile faltered, her eyes darting from the screen to the neighbors now staring at her in stunned disbelief. She stammered something about fabricated data and technical tricks, but no one was listening anymore. Whispers turned into murmurs and murmurs into open accusations. A few neighbors started pulling out their phones, some recording, others texting. And then, just as Karen tried to gather herself for another round of excuses, the door at the back of the room swung open. Two uniformed police officers stepped inside, their expressions serious as they scanned the crowd. "Karen Miller?" one of them called out. The entire room held its breath. And that's when the cops walked in. The officers didn't waste time. They walked straight to Karen, asked her to stand, and began reading her rights as the entire room watched in stunned silence. She sputtered protests, pointing at me and Ethan, but the evidence was already in the hands of the police, and there was no spinning her way out of it. As they escorted her out, a few neighbors actually clapped. Quiet, at first, then louder, like a wave of relief washing over the room. The very next week, the HOA held a special vote, and Karen was officially removed from her position as president. It was the first time in years I'd seen genuine smiles at a meeting. The petty violation notices stopped showing up in my mailbox. The neighborhood gossip cooled down, and for the first time in a long while, peace returned to our little corner of the world. Ethan, with his signature smirk, updated the Wi-Fi password one last time, to bye-bye Karen 123. We both agreed it was the perfect send-off. And if this whole mess taught me anything, it's that real power doesn't come from titles, rules, or fear. It comes from standing your ground, even if it starts with something as small as a Wi-Fi password. If you enjoyed this wild ride and want more jaw-dropping tales of neighborhood drama, power trips, and sweet justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We've got plenty more HOA nightmares, outrageous Karens, and unbelievable true events coming your way. Drop a comment below and let me know. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? And remember, this is just one chapter in a never-ending book of neighborhood chaos. You're watching HOA Stories, where the drama is real, the stakes are high, and the payback is always worth it.